Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because honestly, we are looking at one of the most fascinating cultural paradoxes of our time. We're going to examine this massive collision between ancient, long-dormant history and the chaotic, hyper-fast world of modern internet culture. It's wild. So let's just dive right into this.
Think about your own social media feed lately. Have you noticed a kind of strange blending of worlds? You might be swiping past dance trends and then suddenly, boom, you see a tutorial on ancient Egyptian deities or maybe a deep dive into Viking gods, all just pushed directly to you by the algorithm. How do we even get here? How are these ancient traditions suddenly so incredibly connected to our digital lives? Well, to understand this resurrection, we first kind of have to look at how these gods, quote-unquote, died in the first place.
All right, Chapter 1, The Fall of Old Gods. Let's take a quick historical look. For centuries, the dominant polytheistic religions of the world seemed to just go entirely dormant, right? They were replaced by the massive expansion of monotheism, and we can actually track this slow structural erosion. Take ancient Egypt. It definitely wasn't an overnight disappearance. Back in AD 333, institutional Christianity was expanding really rapidly across Egypt. They had nearly 100 bishops established. Then, fast forward to AD 394, and we get the graffito of Esmet Ahum at the Temple of Isis on Philae. That is literally the very last known hieroglyphic inscription, ever. And finally, in AD 553, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian comes in and officially closes that exact same temple. So as these official temples fell into disrepair and lost their central authority, the literate priesthood completely vanished. Without that overarching infrastructure, the religion just naturally faded away into these tiny localized fragments. Now, moving from the sands of Egypt over to the dense forests of the north, we see a totally different timeline, but a very similar outcome. In 1387, Lithuania became the absolute last European nation to convert to Christianity. This happened when their Grand Duke, Jogaila, married the Polish Queen Jadwiga. It was basically a political union, but it finally brought Western Christianity into Lithuania's fiercely defended pagan lands. And this kind of historical pressure, it completely reshaped entire cultures. Just look at the indigenous Sami people of Northern Europe. Historical documents originally portrayed them as hunters and fishers. But from the Viking expansion, straight through to 14th century Swedish state control, and the heavy influence of the Christian church, their ancestral lands were basically colonized. This intense pressure actually forced the Sami to abandon their traditional seasonal settlements and transition into the nomadic reindeer herding that they're often known for today. The old ways were just systematically paved over. Which brings us to Chapter 2, European Paganism, a Modern Awakening. Okay, so here is the historical twist that literally no one saw coming. These ancient traditions didn't die forever. Today, they are experiencing a modern and in many cases state-recognized reawakening. Remember Lithuania, that last pagan stronghold we just talked about? Well, check out Romuva. This is a reconstructed Lithuanian native faith. And what's so incredible here is exactly how it survived. Followers actually managed to reconstruct their ancient reverence for nature, the solstices, and deities like Perkunas, the thunder god. And they did it by drawing on a massive collection of folklore songs. We're talking a 1 million-strong collection. And get this, despite severe persecution during the Soviet era, where believers were expelled from universities or dealt with much worse, Romuva kept those old songs alive and officially registered as a religion in 1992. And that momentum, it extends right into Scandinavia as well. 4,473. That is the number of followers the Ancestral Association of Iceland had by 2018. To put that into perspective, over just one single decade, their numbers quadrupled. That's huge. They actually successfully campaigned to have the Icelandic government recognize their worship of the Old Norse pantheon, Odin, Thor, Loki, as an official religion way back in 1973. And we're seeing the exact same thing in Denmark with the official recognition of Fornsid. So the old gods are officially back on the census. Moving on to Chapter 3, Pharaohs Reborn, Reconstructing Kemetism. So we've explored the frozen north, but what about those empty temples along the Nile? Enter Kemetism. This emerged in the 1970s, and it's the neo-pagan revival of ancient Egyptian religion. Groups like Kemetic Orthodoxy, they aren't just reading history books for fun. They are meticulously reconstructing ancient worship. We are talking about modern people setting up household shrines with statues of deities like Bastet, Anubis, and Sekhmet. They're lighting candles, offering food, and praying, genuinely attempting to bridge a gap of over 1,500 years. And at the absolute dead center of Kemetism is this one crucial concept: Ma'at. Ma'at is the ancient Egyptian principle of cosmic order, truth, and honor. For Chemitics today, this isn't just historical trivia, right? It's a lived, day-to-day ethical code. The core belief is that maintaining Ma'at through good manners, ethical actions, and ritual worship actually prevents the world from collapsing into chaos. It's a deeply earnest attempt to bring some of that ancient stability into our crazy modern lives.
Now for the really wild part, Chapter 4, Digital Magic, Witch Talk, Chaos. Because let's be real, not all modern revivals happen in quiet reflection at a household altar. And that brings us to our ultimate modern twist, billions, with a B. That is the number of views the hashtag witch talk has racked up. We're talking about this chaotic, visually stunning, meme-fueled spiritualism that is absolutely thriving right now on social media. This is definitely not some tiny fringe subculture anymore. It's a massive global stage. During the pandemic, millions of teens and young adults found themselves endlessly scrolling through 15-second DIY rituals, tutorials on building beginner altars, and these really funny comedic skits about hexing people. It completely democratized and mainstreamed alternative spirituality. But notice the profound tension happening here. It's fascinating. On Witch Talk, you have irony and authentic faith, basically coexisting side by side. On one hand, you've got meme culture. People are adopting the witch aesthetic purely for clout. Think spooky chic vibes, dark lipstick, comedic lipsticks. But then, right next to it, you have genuine practice. You've got sincere users sharing real knowledge on herbal healing, protective sigils, and discussing really deep ethical frameworks like the Wiccan threefold law. It's this super fascinating, incredibly blurry line between online performance and genuine belief. Of course, when something grows this fast and goes completely unmoderated, it sparks some major controversies. Without traditional elders or physical covens to guide novices, often called baby witches, things can get messy. Our sources highlight some pretty serious concerns about cultural appropriation here. Things like newcomers swiping closed indigenous ceremonies, or the massive over-harvesting of sacred white sage just for aesthetic videos. There's also the issue of mixing elements of living religions like Haitian voodoo into silly comedic clips. It really brings up a very real, very tough debate between the democratization of spiritual knowledge and the actual dangers of novices dabbling without any context or respect for traditional boundaries.
All right, Chapter 5, Modern Meaning. Why now? We really need to zoom out and connect the dots here. Whether we're looking at a state-recognized Norse religion in Iceland, a reconstructed Egyptian altar in a suburban living room, or a 15-second spell on TikTok, why is this happening right now? Well, as the French philosopher Chantal Dessol noted, much of this represents, quote, a return to the veneration of sacred nature. Younger generations are feeling increasingly untethered from traditional, mainstream religions, but the thing is, they are still incredibly hungry for meaning. These reclaimed pagan ideals, they perfectly align with modern environmentalism, a strong desire for personal empowerment, and this highly inclusive, do-it-yourself approach to spirituality. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the modern compromise. As one of our sources points out, if a 60-second video helps a teen connect with nature-based spirituality, maybe that's a net positive, even if it lacks the rigor of old grimoires. That's the thing. Meme culture, the spooky aesthetics, the crazy algorithmic trends, they can actually be the shiny packaging that draws a young seeker into legitimate mindfulness, self-care, and real self-discovery. So the crucial point we are left with today is this. What happens next? We are actively watching the formation of digital covens and the real-world revival of million-year-old folklore. But will this modern adaptation of ancient faiths actually sustain a new global network of believers? Or is the digital side of this just a fleeting meme, something destined to completely fade away with the next big algorithmic shift? It's a phenomenal question about the future of human faith. I really hope this explainer has sparked your curiosity and maybe makes you look just a little bit closer the next time ancient history randomly pops up on your timeline. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.